Hi everyone, and welcome back to our Navigo at Home live events, where iRead research team members will be sharing their insights into using digital technologies to support reading in primary age children. This Navigo at Home live event series marks our recent Hungry Little Minds Quality Mark Award from the Department for Education in England. And we're celebrating this through this series of online discussions and practice sharing. So before we get started with our talks today, I'll run through some helpful practicalities. If you're watching the video in the news feed, you might want to watch it in full screen so that you can see the slides more clearly as they come up. And please add your comments and questions throughout the talks so that we can make sure that we factor in enough time at the end to answer these. If we don't get through them all, we'll make sure our speakers take a look at these and answer them in the comments section after the talk. And if you're interested to sign up to future events, please do so below, and I'll pop the link in shortly. So moving to the focus of today, we will be covering using reading games to support children with dyslexia today. And our speakers are Elizabeth Herbert, who is a researcher and programme lead for the Master's Degree course in Specific Learning Difficulties at UCL, and Dr. Emma Sumner, who is a lecturer in psychology and special education. The Q&A session will be supported by Dr. Nellie Joy, who is a researcher on the iRead project. And Liz, Emma and Nellie are all based within the Department of Psychology and Human Development at the UCL Institute of Education. So, without further delay, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Liz.
Using reading games to support children with dyslexia. So the iRead project is a large team made up of 16 partner organisations from 6 different countries who have collaborated to develop the literacy apps. I'm Liz Herbert, I'm Programme Leader of the UCL MA in Specific Learning Difficulties Dyslexia, and I've been working with co-investigator Dr. Emma Sumner and the rest of the team on the project for the last 3 years. Today, Emma and I will be leading the session. Please feel free to add your questions in the chat box, and we will try and answer these in the Q&A session at the end. So Navigo is a literacy game app, and it's aimed at 5 to 11-year-olds. You might have seen our video last week, so do revisit that if you want to know more about it. There are 15 game puzzles that cover content such as phonics, sight word reading, prefixes, suffixes and grammar. And it's been designed by a team of expert practitioners and academics working together. It's already being used in over 50 schools across Europe, and it's currently free to download on Android from the Google Play Store. We were recently awarded a quality mark from the UK DFE Hungry Little Minds campaign, so do look on the DFE website to access this. So, overview for this session. In this session, this is our second live session, and we'll be looking at how reading games and apps can support children with dyslexia in their journey towards becoming skilled readers. In the first part of this presentation, we'll be exploring the skills involved in becoming a reader and discussing the general teaching principles which are recommended for primary children with dyslexia. In the second part, we're going to be looking at how technology can support struggling readers with a particular focus on the Navigo game. So, to become a skilled reader, a learner needs to be able to read with accuracy and fluency in order to be able to comprehend what they have read. So this infographic is the simple view of reading, HOOVER and GOUGH, which is quite old, but it's still used by many schools and educators. It's an interactive model which shows that whilst reading is a complex activity, it can be represented by 2 simple but interdependent processes. Both of these processes are essential. These are word recognition, which is the ability to read the words on the page, and it's represented by the vertical axis, and language comprehension, which is the ability to understand language, and this is represented by the horizontal axis. So we can plot the developing skills of learners, and we can target support accordingly by using this. Children may experience varying difficulties in developing either of these skills. Dyslexic learners tend to be represented often in the top left-hand quadrants. They often have good language comprehension but may struggle to develop those word recognition skills. So this next infographic is Scarborough's reading rope, and it's a really useful graphic representation of what skills are involved in those two processes I've just told you about described in the simple view of reading. It consists of two strands, the lower strand and the upper strand. The word recognition strands, which include phonological awareness, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later, decoding and sight word recognition of familiar words, work together as the reader becomes accurate, fluent, and increasingly automatic with repetition and practice. Concurrently, the language comprehension strands involve background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And these strands work together and they both reinforce one another. The language comprehension strands weave together with the word recognition strands, both to produce a skilled reader. This process, just remember, is not an instantaneous one. So it happens over a period of time, and it also requires explicit instruction and practice of these skills. The journey towards from learning to read, and as fluency develops, moves towards reading to learn. The Navigo app aims to support beginner readers to develop these reading skills, the accuracy, fluency and comprehension, through engaging with the personalised content and activities. So, dyslexia. What is the definition? What do we mean by dyslexia? Key elements of the Rose definition, which is still widely used in the UK, state that dyslexia is a learning difficulty that primarily affects the skills involved in accurate, fluent word reading and spelling. And characteristic features of dyslexia are difficulties in phonological awareness, verbal memory, and verbal processing speed. So in the journey towards becoming a skilled reader, a child will need to learn to develop accuracy and fluency in word reading and spelling. Some learners, these dyslexic learners, often may struggle to develop these skills despite high quality teaching in the classroom, and they may need, and almost always do need, some additional support. At the early stages, dyslexic learners may have some difficulties with phonological awareness, which is the identifying and manipulating of oral language, such as playing around with sounds, with words, with syllables and onsets and rhymes. And they may struggle to develop phonic knowledge, which is the link between letters and sounds, so at the alphabetic principle. They may also struggle to develop automatic sight word recognition, recognising those words on the page, and this can affect the development of reading fluency. So, thinking about the evidence then from research, evidence from research suggests that intervention sessions for children with dyslexia need to have a really strong systematic phonics structure. This is key. So sessions also need to be frequent enough, little and often, to ensure children's progress and to consolidate their learning. Thinking about this, the continuity of learning is very important. So we need to think about periods such as summer holidays, where children might have gaps in their learning, and particularly at the moment with due to COVID, we've had school closures for a couple of months now. We need to think about those gaps that may be widening for these learners. So children who use the Navigo game could provide a way for children to continue their learning through gameplay, which will target these gaps that may have widened. So, teaching principles. What do we do to teach these learners that may have dyslexia, who are struggling with literacy? It's seen from research that certain things can really help in this journey. So little and often, which means distributed practice as opposed to blocked practice, teaching 2 or 3 sessions a week, maybe short sessions that can give the child time. Using all your senses, so teaching using a multi-sensory approach. Avoiding learning confusion, so only focusing on one thing at a time, not introducing too many new things at one time. And shaping complex behaviour, and by that we mean scaffolding learning, so making sure that the child is ready for that scaffold to be released so that they can become an independent learner. And encouraging deep learning, and by that we're using the buzzword metacognition, where children work out rules for themselves and are able to describe strategies that they may use for problem solving. So these principles, just to note, they relate to all learners of all age groups, so either beginner learners or those that are still struggling to read when they get to when they grow older. So Dr. Singleton's literature concludes that as well as being multisensory and phonologically based, the key features of specialist dyslexia teaching are also structured, cumulative and sequential. And Emma's going to go into this in a bit more detail in the next session about how we can use these particular principles through gameplay. So, using technology to support learning, Greg Brooks in the What Works for Children with Literacy Difficulties publication, which is a regularly updated guidance looking at interventions for children with literacy difficulties and has a specific section on dyslexia, said there are really so many apps available that we need to really make sure that the children are using apps that relate to their personal learning needs. And as we know, iRead is a personal learning tool, and so the Navigo game is appropriate here. So ICT approaches do work best when they are precisely targeted. The mediation of a skilled adult is essential to ensure that these technologically driven schemes meet children's needs. Time definitely needs to be allocated effectively so that the diagnostic tools of programs can be used for each child appropriately. Technology can provide a means to practice these skills and support what is going on in the classroom. It really should be seen as part of the solution and not the complete solution. So simply giving students access to technology without supporting them in understanding how it works and then embedding its use in the classroom routines is unlikely to be successful.
Okay, thank you, Liz. So I'll be picking up on some of the points that Liz has already discussed in the first part of this session. So we're starting to see more and more research which demonstrates overall positive effects of literacy apps in improving reading skills. And this is a really important first step in building a case for using technology to support reading development. But we cannot see technology as a panacea. Sometimes, or something that does come out in the research literature, is that while groups of children make progress on average, the improvement across children can be varied and not all children will show improvements. We know that every child is different and has different strengths and needs and will likely respond differently to technology. It's also crucial that the way that technology is used and embedded is considered, and this applies in the classroom, in intervention sessions and also at home. So an important question is, what can we do to link technology to existing approaches and teaching content to support beginner readers and also struggling readers? Some of the points here were covered in our first online event last week for those of you that attended that, but it's also really good to recap on here some of the pointers to consider when we try to decide what makes a good app. It really goes without saying that apps should be engaging, motivating and user-friendly. For example, the graphics and the sound should draw you in, and often these things are the first things to attract children to a game. We also believe that literacy apps should be based on research and linked to the curriculum. It should be meaningful in this respect. In addition to this, Laura Benton and colleagues from the iRead team considered what makes a good game and identified 3 further features to consider. The first being teaching concepts and whether these are provided to support the child within the app. So this may be instructions related to the reading activity, for instance, teaching rules relating to how to break the words down into syllables, or around the game mechanics, such as the actions you need to use to play the game. The second point is if it's clear where the child is going. So what do they need to do? How will they get there? And what's the aim of the game or the app? And finally, is the child's progress clearly communicated? So is the feedback visual? Do they see gems being awarded or stars, for example? Or are there verbal cues as well, or verbal feedback, such as the game saying, that's right? And also, does the feedback elaborate on how to recover from any errors made? Now, we'd like to use Navigo as a case study to demonstrate how it was designed with struggling readers in mind, and how we tried to map the content and approach to the teaching principles that Liz identified in the first part of today's session. So linking to the teaching principles, there is a defined progression within Navigo, which takes a systematic approach to introducing the activities. Navigo's content is diverse. It covers 280 language features, which are broken down into the categories shown here in the different colours. It also has an extensive dictionary, which means that children are exposed to a range of different words rather than repetition of the same words in each game. And the selection of these language areas was informed by theories of reading development and also mapped to the DFE curriculum in England. Phonics has a strong focus in early reading development in the UK, and so there is a focus here within Navigo, but importantly the games are not limited to that, and there are opportunities to engage in many different activities that test these other important skills beyond phonology and also at the sentence level. The progression used in Navigo maps onto existing schemes and the order in which these skills are typically introduced in the curriculum. The Navigo game also takes a structured sequential approach to working on the language features, which Liz discussed earlier. Children engage first in accuracy games, where they practice applying the correct linguistic rule, for example, matching the sound that they hear with the visual form. They then will progress to activities which require using and combining those skills that they've learned in context. For instance, pulling together word tiles to create a word. And finally, once these skills have been mastered, the final stage is to engage in games that move more towards automaticity, which are games that have a timed element and ask the child to respond quickly. So, for example, tapping on words that begin with a particular sound as quickly as possible. There are many short games that tap into these skills, which lends itself well to a little and often approach. And this structured gameplay provides many opportunities to practice and to overlearn. Finally, related to features that can be seen in Navigo, engagement is key, particularly for those children that lack motivation or enjoyment with reading. Navigo has a personalised approach where the child can design their own avatar, and they go on a journey picking up new ways to customise their avatar, which are rewards for progressing through the game. The activities are also responsive to the child, so that if something is particularly challenging, they will have the opportunity to practice in different contexts. But equally, if they've grasped a particular feature, they will move through the game to more challenging content. There are a range of activities, all of which take a multisensory approach. And importantly, the feedback provided within the game encourages deep learning. So there is both outcome feedback, which is communicated visually, and elaborative feedback, which encourages the child to have another go and offers linguistic hints to try and help the child to make connections and to think about the steps they need to take. So if we think about how to support technology use, in a study that observed the interactions of children with dyslexia while playing on reading apps, game talk was shown to be a window into the learning process. Listening to comments made by children can provide a wealth of information about how to further support these learners or when to step in. So it's really important to try and encourage and take note of any game talk. 3 main areas have been identified in this research that I show here as at times needing scaffolding. So it could be that some children need help with the mechanics of the game, so how to select a response, how to move the avatar forward, or with more general support strategies such as reminding the child to listen to the instructions given or the feedback. Or it could be that the adult needs to help with demonstrating linguistic rules that are being used within the game, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. In the home, you may want to introduce the games progressively. Some children may need more support than others to get started, and you may want to sit and observe your child to start off with and then give feedback. You could consider whether you can make time for a regular playtime session with parents or with siblings, and you may find that your child is much better than you at finding their way through the games. But it's a good opportunity to try and identify if your child is having any difficulties, so you can pick up and address any problems one at a time. The idea of helping with linguistic rules has been shown more recently in a study that's come from the iRead project when working with struggling readers. Here we found that struggling readers are often receptive to outcome feedback, which is whether they got the answer correct or incorrect, but they may need further support with understanding more elaborative feedback. So for example, if the feedback is saying look for a verb, this requires a level of metalinguistic knowledge which perhaps could be scaffolded by the adult by reminding the adult that a verb is a doing word, or perhaps given an example of another verb. So helping the child to problem solve, but breaking down the task so it's more appropriate. It is also, of course, worth reflecting on the characteristics of dyslexia, which Liz talked through earlier. Many children can have working memory difficulties or processing difficulties. So this extra level of scaffolding or of information may be particularly helpful for struggling readers. Metacognitive talk is a bit of a buzzword in education at the moment. It means to try and encourage children to think about how they complete the task so that they can problem solve more effectively in the future. And you can consider doing this alongside or after technology use by asking some of these questions here. So asking simple questions such as how did you do that, and asking the child to talk you through the steps helps to raise their awareness of the processes that they've used. Why do you think that was the correct answer? What is it that you're looking out for? And what are your options here? So digging deeper and trying to encourage some of this game talk. Other points about how to support technology use: make it short and sweet, as Liz said, little and often. Short 15-minute sessions regularly over the course of a week are much better than a long 1-hour session just once a week. And finally, have fun. So the take-home messages here from this session are that technology has many advantages for children with dyslexia. There are opportunities to revisit content and practice skills in a fun and engaging way. But technology use does require careful planning and scaffolding, and where possible should be linked with other areas of learning, such as the content in intervention sessions or from the classroom. This way the content can be reinforced using technology. Now, we know that in classrooms, learning occurs by exploring ideas, rehearsing content, and engaging in dialogue with the teachers or peers. Game-based learning can also try to take the same approach. So we would say to encourage game talk, and where needed, step in to demonstrate a concept or offer support. For children with reading difficulties, encourage children to verbalise what they are doing to help them to problem solve in the future. And this could be really valuable as they move forward to being more independent. So we hope that this workshop will help you to think critically about the games that you are selecting and how you could embed them in your teaching practice or homeschooling activities. You can also look at the supporting resources for guidance on where to look for suitable apps. Thank you for listening, and we now have time for a few questions.
Hello everyone, so I've been picking up on questions that have been asked during the talk and also ahead of the talk, so I'll be asking them now. So we had a couple of questions asked ahead of the talk. One of them was about ADHD. So we had a question, so how to manage attention deficit, and can preschool children with ADHD benefit from selective reading games, and how should they be exposed to them, and do they have the same effect on children? So that's quite a lot of questions. Do you want to have a go at responding, Liz?
Yeah, sure. So I think we've really got 3 questions there rolled into one, so I'll try and answer them all together. So ADHD and dyslexia really they're distinct conditions, but they frequently overlap. We have something called comorbidity, so you often find that a child with ADHD may also have dyslexia, and dyslexic children, like children with ADHD, may really have some difficulties with paying attention. We often find they have attention difficulties, maybe particularly with regards to reading, because reading's so demanding for dyslexic children. It causes them to tire easily and limits their ability to sustain concentration. So with regard to the question, you had a specific question about preschool children and the Navigo game. So I'd say it's probably more suitable for children when they start in reception. So there are other games on the market that are more specifically targeted to that preschool age group. And the Hungry Little Minds website that Emma talked about earlier in our talk is a really good place to look. So these have all been evaluated by the DFE. So if you want a good app, that's a good place to start. So the Hungry Little Minds campaign recommended Navigo for school-age children more specifically, so beginner readers. So it's probably best to start using it to support how reading and phonics are being taught in the school setting, rather than just using it before they start. So this way it will enable them to practice the literacy skills that they're working on in the classroom already. So the game focuses on developing skills that underpin the reading process, such as phonics, letters and sounds at an early stage. And they might not have met these concepts in preschool learning. So the other question, so reading apps like Navigo may effectively hold the attention and they may provide additional motivation for those learning to read. So it can work really well for learners with ADHD. So really highly recommend it. And it also works for anyone who's struggling to attend in more formal learning situations. So if you have a child that really doesn't enjoy reading, it might be a way in for them. So you've got making errors in the game, and that helps the player to improve. So trial and error, that through trial and error they can learn the specific action needed to advance next time and improve with no chance that, they can improve with no chance of failing in public or being teased for reading aloud. So it can break down a lot of barriers, I think, for children with ADHD and dyslexia. So with regards to exposure, I think that was another question you asked there. So learners with ADHD, it may, for them to make it part of a home learning timetable would be a really good way of facilitating this. So make sure your boundaries are really clear, they're really carefully explained at the start. I'd have regular set times, do short sessions, as Emma said, that 15 to 20 minutes a day, depending on the age or the stage of your learner. So think about that little and often, as we said before, especially with regard to those preschoolers that you were asking about. Also, have a think about how you supervise the use of the Navigo game, and make sure you support your child during sessions if you're able to do that, if you've got the time, and use that scaffolded approach that we talked about earlier that's so important. So I'm hoping I've answered most of those 3 questions there. So I know a lot about ADHD. We've had quite a lot of questions about ADHD there. So thanks, Nellie.
Thank you very much, Liz. That was a very comprehensive answer. Thank you. So I'll be picking up on a couple more that have come during the talk and that have come before. So this one came before the talk, but I think it will also answer one of Linda's question that was asked during the talk. So we've got this parent, I assume, asking, what should I be thinking in terms of length of time on an iPad game for my 8-year-old dyslexic daughter? So I think you've answered partially to this one during your response, but is there anything specific we need to think about thinking of an 8-year-old dyslexic child? Do you want to answer? I think Emma picked up on this during the talk. Would you like to expand on this?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you for the question. And this often comes up, how often is little and often? And I know we said it quite a lot, that term in our session as well. The intervention literature suggests that little and often is around 15 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week. But of course, you do have to think about the child and what they can manage as well and what's feasible. So for an 8-year-old child with dyslexia, perhaps you could aim for around 15 to 20 minutes short sessions, but more regularly, so maybe Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And you monitor how that goes and their attention span, and add to that if you think it's necessary, or add with other kind of activities that you may think would support that child. If you have a younger child, perhaps you start shorter sessions, perhaps 10 to 15 minutes, and you just do this 2 or 3 times a week. And again, you monitor how that goes. So I suppose it's, you see how it goes, but start with perhaps a short 15-minute session and go from there. That's much more favourable than a long 1-hour session that's just conducted once a week.
Thank you. That's great. So it's all about personalization and trying to find out what works for your child as well. Thank you, Emma. So we had a technical question about parent trying to download the app, but it says Android only. He's asking, is there not a Mac version? At the moment, the Android version is the way to access the app. So if you've got an Android app, preferably, an Android tablet, sorry, preferably, that's the way to access the game at the moment. So yeah, we're hoping it would be available on other platforms, but for now it's Android. And you may also download it on your phone, but obviously the screen resolution is not quite as good. I'll pick up on another question that was asked in advance. So this one is about the effectiveness of the software. So have we tested it? As the effectiveness of the software been formally tested is the question.
Yeah, I think we're thinking about research here. So one of the things, obviously, due to COVID-19, we do have had now some gaps in our research because we started going into schools in the summer term and before and getting our research projects going. So we did run some studies last year that looked at the effectiveness of a key feature of the game, which we talked about in our session earlier. So we looked at feedback specifically, and since this is known to be particularly powerful in supporting children's learning, and this study is currently being written up, so we hope to be able to share that with you on the iRead website. We're also currently undergoing a large-scale evaluation study across all the 6 countries that are involved in the iRead project, and this is specifically focusing on how the iRead project technologies are being integrated into different school contexts with a view to understanding how they impact on pedagogical practices and learning. And we've got lots of studies planned, so we hope to publish a variety of these studies next year, and we hope to get back into schools to be able to continue the research that we've started. So yeah, we look forward to getting on with this. So
thank you, Liz. Thank you. So taking the chance to pick up on another comment this time that is about the resources that are available on our website. So I believe one of the parents during the talk has been able to look through those, and I do recommend you also go and have a look, and I can put a link on the Facebook conversation so you can also access these resources from the website. So I'll follow up on this comment because I think they are indeed very useful. So thanks for commenting on this. I'll pick up on one more question that is relating to fluency work. So is there any way the apps can support fluency in reading, especially with regards to children who have difficulties with syntax and grammar? And so yeah, we think in primary years. Yeah.
Okay, that's another good question, and I'm happy to try and answer that as best as I can. So of course, reading fluency is really important. Reading fluency relies on the child being able to process the word on the page automatically, so quickly. And so they must move from decoding words phoneme by phoneme, sound by sound, to fluent whole word recognition. So this is what we usually call the lexical route. So it's this quick retrieval of the word form. So we do have some automaticity games in the Navigo app where children are required to quickly blast a word that they see that corresponds to the instructions that they're given. And the idea here is to, for them to quickly process and move through the app. So we do have games that focus on that, but there are other things that you perhaps could consider supporting alongside gameplay. So precision teaching is one thing that can help to increase reading fluency. So here you may identify words that the child has difficulty with retrieving quickly. So usually you would pick out common, like high frequency words that are important for the child to know how to read quickly. And you would chart this on a piece of paper perhaps and ask children to read through them as quickly and as accurately as possible, timing them as they go, with the idea of them speeding up each time. So the emphasis here should really be on reading accurately as well as at speed. And if you were to type into Google Precision Teaching, a number of different probe templates would come up that perhaps you could use. And the other thing just to add to that is the idea of repeated reading. So teachers and parents can model fluent reading, so demonstrating a suitable reading rate, intonation as you read, reading with expression, noting any punctuation in the text and its use. So some children with grammar or syntax difficulties may need further support in understanding the role of speech marks, for example, or other types of punctuation. So you could really demonstrate this and model this and ask the student or the child to follow along as you read. So it could be that they are reading silently from their own copy of the text or using a quiet voice. And then you ask them to read the same text on their own independently. And really, again, the idea is that first they're reading for accuracy and then for speed, so starting to quicken up. And this idea of use scaffolding and modelling and imitating how to read fluently. So I'm hoping that answered some or part of your question.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Emma. That was a great answer. Let me check if we've got any more coming. Yeah, I think we've covered all of the questions that have been asked. So I suppose I'll close this session for today, and I'll pass on to, thank you, Emma, thank you, Liz, and I'll pass on to Sarai, who'll let you know a little bit more about next week's event. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Nellie. Thanks for coordinating the chat, and also I'm sure everyone who's joined in today will join me in thanking our speakers, Emma and Liz, for a really interesting and detailed discussion. So next week is our third and final session, and we have a special session which is intended for children, and Drew Wilkins from Fish in a Bottle will be joining us, and the topic will be Ask the Game Designers. So if you have any budding game designers who have burning questions, get them to come along next week for more interactions and more discussions on using digital technologies for supporting reading. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next Thursday at 11 AM. Bye.